It is February 14th, 2025, and the Middle East is in quite an interesting situation right now. Yes, I know that you've heard Donald Trump claiming that the US is going to buy the Gaza Strip. It's going to force all of the remaining Palestinians onto neighboring countries, and that everything is going to work out fine according to his plan. You've also probably heard that the King of Jordan literally just sat there during a press conference with Trump in person and heard Trump say all of this and had nothing to say in response. And you may have even heard that now Saudi Arabia is scrambling to come up with its own plans, right? Everyone seems to have an idea of what should happen to or for or around the Palestinian people. But what about the actual Palestinians? What about the Palestinians who have just endured and survived 16 months of a genocidal bombardment and blockade carried out by Israel with the help of the United States? What does this mean for them? And what is their biggest takeaway from this? Because the reality is that Israel went into this genocide claiming that they were going to defeat Hamas. In reality, they meant that they were going to defeat the Palestinian people. And guess what? They have done absolutely none of the above. They have defeated no one. The Palestinian spirit still remains alive and it still continues on to march forward, even with everything that the Palestinian people are up against, from Gaza to the West Bank and beyond. We got into all of the latest and the meaning of it all with the special guest earlier. So let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Dr. Ramzy Baroud, a Palestinian-American journalist, author, and editor of the Palestine Chronicle. Dr. Baroud, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you for having me, Rachel.
Now, I'm glad I get to talk to you today. I know we have quite a lot to go over, but I want to start with the latest coming out of the US. So we have Donald Trump, he's back in the White House, and his decision to openly demand the full ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people in Gaza seems to be taking even some in Israel by surprise. You've got reports describing Israel's far right genocidal maniacs as quote unquote high on Trump and emboldened by his rhetoric. So we look at Trump, he went from being the champion of a ceasefire deal in the Gaza Strip before he was even inaugurated to then turning around and just basically going full genocide, ethnic cleansing, get the Palestinians out of their land. How do you view his approach, and what does it mean for the Palestinians in Gaza who have truly been through just so much over the last 16 months?
We have to look first at why is he saying these things, and does it really matter? Let's start with the first part. Why is Trump doing or saying these things? Well, he's saying these things because he has no leverage. And this is a person who's approaching foreign policy from a business point of view. And it's just a disaster. I mean, just the whole notion of trying to think about foreign policy issues that are deeply situated in they have historical roots that go back 100 years and more, in an area that is one of the most complex regions in the world in terms of global competition, in terms of energy resources, in terms of internal conflicts and instabilities, and in terms of the fact that the world's ongoing colonial kind of 20th century style colonial regime as Israel is still happening and still manifesting itself in constant wars, violence, military occupation, racial apartheid, and of course the latest act of genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza for the last 15, 16 months. Now, Trump comes and he thinks, well, I'm going to make things better by basically pretend that I have leverage. So my leverage is, well, I give money to Jordan and Egypt, and therefore they have to accept taking Palestinian refugees. And if they say no, then I will hold back the leverage I have over them, and this is going to push them into accepting my so-called proposal. And if they don't, and maybe I can at least find some kind of a compromise. But this is silly. It is silly because he thinks that the Arabs have a sway or leverage over the Palestinians, because clearly the United States have zero access to Palestinian politics. Gaza has survived the Israeli genocide, resisted, pushed back, and in many interpretations even defeated the Israeli army, like no other Arab army in the past has done. And they've done it not only without any international or Arab support, they have done it despite the fact that Israel was fighting with American arms and with American blank check and with American support and sustained support throughout the Biden administration. So, what can Trump add to this mix to make things more difficult for Palestinians? Very, very little. So there are no margins. I'm not a businessman, but my understanding is that if you are going to be using maximum pressure as a way to get your way in whether in business or in politics, you have to have margins through which you work to achieve that maximum pressure. The region has already crossed that threshold. It's already on the brink of so many things. Regional war is the only thing that can possibly happen. We know that Trump doesn't want a regional war because a regional war in the Middle East, it's not the kind of wars that starts and finish in a month or two. They will last for years and years, and that's going to define his legacy. And that goes against everything that his foreign policy stands for. Palestinians know that, Arabs know that, so they know at the end of the day he is just trying to create leverage out of nothing, and he has nothing. Now, will it make any difference? Absolutely not. If you and this is the problem, the media focuses so much on two things. Number one, the way that the Arabs are reacting. Well, the Arabs are reacting, a country like Jordan, I mean, Jordan is a client regime for the United States. Now, hope that doesn't hurt anybody's feelings, but everybody knows that already. And not just any client regime, but it's at the lowest spectrum of the client regime. The client regime in which America has military bases, I think three major military bases in Jordan. They use Jordanian airspace, Jordanian territories to train, to spy, to bomb, to defend Israel against Iranian retaliations and all the rest. We know that about Jordan. So what do you expect to get out of King Abdullah? You bring him as if a pupil to the White House. You push him into a press conference that he did not want to attend. You start lecturing him about what he should do, and tell the guy. I mean, how humiliating that is! Tell the guy, I'm going to take part of your land, your sovereign land, and I'm going to give it to the Palestinians, whom you have to accept. I mean, this is not foreign policy. This is bizarre. But the fact is, Jordan has very little leeway, the very little margins. What can they do about it? But Jordan doesn't matter. Egypt doesn't matter. With all due respect to all Arab regimes, none of them matter because none of them played any role in the defense of Gaza throughout the genocides. Only Gazans did, and Gazans not only managed to win, they actually managed to impose all of their demands and objectives on the Palestinians, and a million Palestinians from the south went back to the north. So this whole politicking going on between the US and the Arabs, as far as Palestinians are concerned, it doesn't matter to us because no matter what you decide or what you don't decide, we're not going anywhere. We're not leaving Gaza, and the demographics of Gaza will not change, even if Trump wants that.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you bring that up because that's what I've been seeing when I'm looking at the media coverage and even just watching that press conference with Jordan's king sitting there looking around as if Trump is talking about some other fictional land, right? As if he's not sitting there right in front of him saying, "I'm going to buy Gaza and expel the Palestinians." And then I look at the media coverage and I see these reports talking about Saudi Arabia scrambling, right? Going, "Uh-oh, we have to come up with some sort of a plan because clearly Trump is acting like he has a plan and Israel is endorsing it, at least for now." And so now you've got other players in the region going, okay, we have to react. But exactly as you pointed out there, for 16 months, we have watched a genocide be live streamed before our eyes. And Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, they have done nothing meaningful for the Palestinians. It has been the Palestinians themselves who have been the ones who have survived this, who have fought back against Israel and the broader axis of resistance. But when it comes to where things go from here, and when you have all of these different parties trying to make decisions for the Palestinian people, how do you see the current situation in Gaza, where the Palestinians are? I know that, to a certain extent, yes, they are reliant on aid, right? They are reliant on getting support, but at the same time, they've also made it very clear we're not going to just leave this land and let you turn it into Trump land and basically bulldoze over all of these war crimes that you just spent over a year committing.
Right. I think any political argument to make sense would have to start with a proper unit of analysis. What is the principle according to which we are analyzing this? Unfortunately, not only from mainstream media, but also many in independent media and many so-called activists and solidarity activists and all of that kind of engaged Trump exactly the way he wanted to be engaged. He wanted to be the center of attention. He wanted this to sound as if it's the Americans who have all the levers, all the cards that would allow them to put pressure on Palestinians, and made it sound like Palestinians are these kind of passive victims, all lining up with whatever left of their homes or clothes or whatever, amassing at the border at Rafah near Egypt or at the Israeli border, just waiting for someone to please make a decision. Should we stay or should we leave? We have absolutely no agency. We're not even involved in this. But I mean, this is not the proper unit of analysis, because as you said, none of them played any role. None of them, with all due respect to the international community, the ICC, the ICJ. We would love to see Israel and Israeli leaders being paraded before the international community for the war crimes that they have committed against the Palestinians. We would love to see all of these things. But from a tangible point of view, the thing that you can actually see in front of you as a physical evidence that these factors played a role in the Israeli decision to accept the ceasefire, none of them matters. None, including myself. Everything that we've done, none of it really matters. The decision was made because the Palestinian people withstood, remained steadfast, fought back, and resisted. It's as simple as that. I'm not making an argument on behalf of, armed struggle versus non-violent struggle. I don't care. That's a philosophical argument. I'm talking from a historical and a political point of view. This happened. So this notion that the Palestinians are not relevant to this conversation actually serves Israeli and American interests, because it kind of, in a way, put the ball back in Netanyahu's court. So Netanyahu comes back to the United States after his meeting, various meetings with Trump and others, in a very triumphant mode. He is unifying the extremists around him, saying, "Don't worry, America has this. America has got our back. No matter what will happen, we have a new doctrine that says Palestinians need to leave." Now, here's the thing that is, I think, very, very important here, and that is the real fear is not America is going to go to war. They can't go to war against Gaza, but they can't. They will, I mean, because they did. I mean, they actually did. The war that Israel launched on the Palestinian people was an Israeli American war. The Americans were very much involved in intelligence gathering, in providing the armaments, and in many other ways. For example, the famous Nusayrat massacre involved American agents. So we still don't know the extent of American involvement, but we also know that the US has sent nearly 90,000 tons of explosives to Israel. So the Americans did fight this war. And if the Israelis lost the war, then the Americans have lost the war. So we know that Trump is not going to be going with his, army to Gaza anytime soon. But the real fear is that these statements have given this kind of pretense to Israel, saying, "Hey, we're not fighting a war for Israel. We are respecting and honoring the wishes of His Excellency, the President of the United States of America. This is his doctrine. This is what he stands for. And we are just fulfilling these wishes." If Israel had the capacity to actually ethnically cleanse the Palestinians through military means, which they have tried and failed for 15, 16 months, they would have taken that statement by Trump and carried out that ethnic. But they still didn't. And they continued to adhere to the ceasefire agreement because they have no military option anymore. So again, at the end of the day, it seems that the only real political agent that is able to actually affect outcomes are the Palestinians of Gaza. We need to talk about this. Otherwise, we haven't learned anything from 15, 16 months of war and genocide in the Strip.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I guess that kind of serves as a reminder of why you're seeing the media coverage that you are, right? Why it's turning into this free for all of, Saudi Arabia says this or Jordan does that and Trump is saying this. There's such a focus on Trump's comments because, yeah, while we're talking about that, we're not talking about the Palestinian people and everything that they have gone through. I mean, I know that you have lost several members of your own family, not just because they were, killed in Israeli bombs as collateral damage, but because they were specifically sought out, targeted, and killed by Israel. And, when you look at all of the damage. And I know that the official death toll is now up over 60,000 killed. Trump has said when he's talking about all of the Palestinians being expelled, he's putting it at there's between 1.7 million and 1.9 million Palestinians still in Gaza. So he is coming out and saying that hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been killed without actually saying it. How do you view the situation that the Palestinian people are in now? And this goes as a whole, right? Because I know that Israel is also now ramping up its targeting of the West Bank now that it has, kind of a free hand from the US in some ways, even more so than it did before. But what does that mean for kind of the Palestinian struggle and where it stands right now in 2025?
If the outcomes of war are to be judged based on the number of victims, I think the history of humankind would have changed entirely. The US would have emerged victorious in Vietnam. The whole world would have changed. But we don't. It's not the number of victims. I can't control, or we Palestinians cannot control the fact that Israel is targeting innocent civilians and killing them in the tens of thousands. We can't control that. You can't control your enemy's behavior regarding civilians and disrespect for international law. But what really matters is that the objectives of the war. Israel has certain objectives, Palestinians had certain objectives. Israeli objectives, defeating the resistance, dismantling the resistance, pushing the Palestinians out of the Sinai Desert, taking complete and permanent so called security control over Gaza, meaning reoccupying Gaza militarily, building settlements, bringing investors. Jared Kushner is extremely interested in real estate in Gaza for some reason, and doing all of these things. None of them have been achieved, none whatsoever. And of course, the main objective was to release the detainees or the captives using military means. That also has failed. So Israel has been taught that there are certain military or there are certain limits to its military superiority. And the limits this time are beyond anything we have ever seen before. And this is a disaster for Israel because Israel is a country that is essentially military, along with the intelligence, and then the state. If the military is failing and the intelligence is failing, as they have failed time and time again, then what is the state of Israel? It's just like any other ordinary state. And that's the problem. And this is why Netanyahu is prolonging. This is why they keep pushing and pushing. And you feel like, why are you doing this? Clearly, there is no victory in Gaza. Why are you trying going to Trump and trying to get a statement from him and from Germany and from this and that? The outcome has already been determined because, as Netanyahu said in the beginning of this war, he said, although he did not have the right intention, he said, this is Israel's last, meaning that we can't stand to lose this war. This is a war that is at par with the Israel so-called war of independence, which is the catastrophe, the Nakba for Palestinians in 1948. So you created this equation in which the war that has led to the creation of Israel on the ruins of historic Palestine is being fought again, which means that you have to win to maintain that independence. But then what happens if you lose? And they have. And that's what they can't accept. Because now they are in a position, if they do finally accept that they couldn't win or they actually lost, as many Israeli military generals speak about this. Even Itamar Ben Gvir, the extremist national minister, is saying this was not a defeat, it was a complete surrender. So this is not Ramzy Baroud interpreting these things. This is what the Israeli intelligence and military and political officials are saying in Israel throughout the day, throughout all Israeli Hebrew media. So on the Palestinian side, we were trying to find any kind of access to balance out what Israel is able to do. Israel goes to Jenin in the West Bank. They are ethnically cleansing Palestinians in the northern West Bank. About 40, 50,000 Palestinians have already been ethnically cleansed in recent months. They are going after Kalkilia, Tulkarim, Nablus, and so forth and so on. Nobody is saying anything. Nobody is capable of doing anything about it. In fact, a lot of these things are actually being facilitated by the Palestinian Authority. When Israel is not resisted, Israel gets exactly what it wants. It wants to build settlements, expand, ethnically cleanse Palestinians, destroy ancient olive groves, do anything, flatten mountains, they can do anything. Gaza has proved to be that point in Israeli history that we have never seen before, not for the last 76, 77 years, in which Israel militarily is being stopped and pushed back. And this is what Palestinians are internalizing, not only in Gaza, but in the West Bank and elsewhere. There's this new kind of triumphant type of political discourse emerging from Palestine. And I think this requires a lot of attention, a lot of discussion. For example, we all watched the million Palestinians returning from the south of Gaza to the north, I think starting on January 27. But what we didn't pay attention to, and I tried as much as I could, is what were they saying? I mean, remember, this trail of tears of sword has taken place in the past in Palestine, leading to the Nakba, 1948. These people were going from the south, from the north to the south. They were crying. They were desperate. Zionist snipers were all over the place, gunning them one after the other. People could not go back to the bodies of their loved ones to collect or to bury. People were running in total, frantic and in total fear, and and that legacy lived with us for 3, 4 generations. I inherited that legacy of the Nakba, my children, and generations of Palestinians all over the world, in which we affiliated Palestine with this the process of ethnic cleansing, and how it made us feel as a people, that we are constantly fighting for recognition, for identity, for the right to go back north. For once, never been allowed, not one of us ever returned north until January 27. So you have this almost an equal number of the Palestinians who were pushed out of Palestine in 1948. We are looking about 750,000, 800,000 Palestinians. That same number was returning to the north. Yes, the north of Gaza, but that's not how Palestinians saw it. They saw that this is the first time, through our own resilience and popular resistance as a people, without anybody's intervention or help, we actually managed to take the first steps towards that coveted right of return for the Palestinian people. They were singing, they were dancing, they were smiling. They say, "We've lost everything, we've lost half of our families, but we are happy that for the first time we emerge victorious." That psychology, that collective psychology that is going to result from that historical moment, I think is going to prove to be a game changer as far as the relationship of between Palestine and Israel, and the Palestinians and their lands, and the bigger picture, that of the Nakba, that of the restoration of fundamental and historical Palestinian rights that go back to 76 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That is an incredibly powerful story. And I think it's a reminder, too, of why so much of what you see Israel do in terms of their targeting of Palestinians, so much of it, it's not just about the bombs, it's also psychological. It's trying to break their spirit, it's cutting them off from their most basic resources. It's, torturing members of their families and rounding people up and arresting, young, well, and in many cases children, right? And you see the way that Israel targets the Palestinians in so many different ways, but they have not been able to break that spirit. And that's even with all of the international support that was given to Israel, all of the bombs that were given to Israel to continue to target the Palestinians. I think that that is a very important story, and one that I wish that more people would listen to and understand. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and that you are continuing to spread that message, and that you took the time to join me today to break down and to explain and give more insight into all of the latest. Dr. Ramzy Baroud, a Palestinian-American journalist, author, and editor of the Palestine Chronicle, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you for having me, Rachel, and keep up the good work.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanction. You can also check out Sanction over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.